Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Corporate Jet Investors Town Hall. It's great to see people from Hampton Court, Miami, Napa, Provence, California, Oklahoma, Montreal, Washington, DC, Zurich, Key Biscayne, New York, Chicago, and so many more. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to look at the key topic of closing deals. There's been a lot of spotlight has been shone on this area, not a lot of spotlight, one spotlight has been shone on this topic. So we're delighted to start with Joan Roberts, who needs no introduction, from IATS, and also Jeff Snowden from Untitled. Guys, how are you?
Very good. How are you this morning? And Jeff is with Aerospace Report.
Sorry, Aerospace Report. I'm so sorry, Jeff. I
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that.
I was hoping no one would notice, and I just kept going. Sorry, Jeff. Jeff, you can start off as a way of saying sorry. What are you seeing at the moment?
Well, we're seeing a great increase in closings. You know, ever since probably about October of last year, it's just been a steady climb. December was crazy. And we didn't really have much of a slowdown in January, February, March, and April. I mean, today, I never thought Wednesday, April 14th, when I accepted this invitation, was going to be a crazy, crazy day for closings. But we have so many closings today, it's insane. So, and I see some of the people I'm working with on some of them on the screen. So at least they're not expecting me to work right now, I guess. But
do you see any signs of it slowing down, Joe?
I do not. Jeff, what do you think?
No, I mean, you know, March and April of last year were, I mean, two of the worst months we've ever had in the history of our company. And as you saw the states start opening up, you know, June 1 to now, I mean, it's been crazy. I mean, volume's almost double on our end. And, you know, I don't see anything. When I talk to the brokerage community, the only really thing that I see from them is the supply issue. Is there going to be enough planes for people to trade? And other than that, I mean, I kept thinking it's going to slow down. It's going to slow down. It hasn't. And so, I mean, there's a part of me that thinks that we're going to ride a year or two wave of this. You know, I think COVID has been, you know, you always hate to say this, but we've been a fortunate industry to where we've benefited from it. You know, the industry's doing well. And I think it will stay strong for a while.
Jeff, this time last year, everyone was starting to get their first lockdown. Are you surprised at how quickly the industry adapted and deals got closed, even when people couldn't meet up and aircraft couldn't be visited?
You know, I think a little bit yes and no. You know, it's interesting. We had so many deals in the pipeline that just got put on hold. You know, you had deals that were ready, but they just physically couldn't get to the closing location to take delivery. And so once the states started opening up, it kind of seemed like it went business back to usual. And so, you know, I don't know that it particularly changed the way that deals are closed from our point of view. Now, I'm sure if you ask somebody that, you know, in the logistics of, you know, moving the planes and the physical aircraft, I bet that they had to adapt. But from our end, you know, once everything opened back up and people were able to start closing again, business kind of went back to normal. So.
Joan, what else are you seeing?
I agree 100% with everything that Jeff said. I think probably the, you know, biggest stumbling block was transatlantic transactions. Not being able to get into Europe to do pre-buy. But other than that, it seems like business is as normal or better than normal, actually.
And Jeff, is there anything that people in the industry should be aware about when it comes to closing transactions at the moment?
I mean, I think obviously, you know, in light of the aircraft guarantee and all the Wright brothers, there's just even more emphasis on the KYC due diligence piece. And so, you know, as Joan and I have kind of talked about, you got a lot of factors that have made closing deals a lot harder than they used to be. You have increased volume, you have an increased due diligence aspect. I mean, we all have our own due diligence, but it's heightened right now. We're getting more and more questions about policies and procedures and insurance and stuff like that we ever have. And then I think kind of the one thing that I think really has made it hard is you just keep seeing these closings that are delayed and delayed and delayed, and it makes it hard. And I think the maintenance shops are all behind, and you have closings push. And what I think is the hardest thing for me in closings these transactions is that there's this component that you have to get done of the KYC, but you have that with the people that don't want to do anything on the transaction until they know they're going to buy the plane. And so we'll work hard and hard to get all the information needed for closing, and then people come back and kind of give you why would I work on this? I don't even know if we're going to buy the plane yet. It's delayed and maintenance or it's stuff like that. And I had a perfect example of one yesterday where I've been on this, I've been on them to get me information for closing. And they basically said, well, I'm not going to know until Friday if I'm going to accept the plane. And if I accept it on Friday, I want to close on Monday. And so you're talking running over the weekend, getting all the information from a KYC, how you're going to register the plane, getting everything done. And so it just seemed like the timelines have just shrunk. And so you just have this rush to get stuff done. And it just seems like these deals are quieter than normal, but the second that they seem to go through, it's just, you got 2 or 3 days to get this deal done and do it, all while doing all the KYC and due diligence that's required. So it's kind of like Mike Francis asked on the last call, is it a money thing that can prevent the escrow companies, or is it a timing thing? It's a timing thing, And so if we can kind of come together and be a little more proactive, in that downtime, I think that will ultimately make closings go a little bit smoother.
I agree with what Jeff is saying. I think that there are several things that we have to take into consideration, though. And I think a lot of times the brokers or the buyers or sellers don't have the information they need to give us until the last minute. So, while it makes it very stressful, it's just not available to give to us. But I would like to stress, just like Jeff did, anything you can do, if you can at least get wiring instructions for where funds will be sent, even though you don't have final amounts, if you can get that to us ahead of time, we can get our KYC done and get that out of the way. Because like Jeff said, everyone is in a hurry. And, the invent of the FAA taking DocuSign, that's also increased pressure to close fast, prepare the docs, send them out through DocuSign. Okay, well, let's do it in 30 minutes, And I know we personally have seen a lot more undesirable people trying to set up escrows with us and on airplanes that we consider to be undesirable airplanes. And we know they'll come under investigation somewhere down the road. So I don't know what's causing that. I don't know if it's the influx of the migrants at the border, which they say is, causing the drug cartels to have greater access to our country, or if it's backlash from Aircraft Guarantee Wright brothers. I don't know what it is, but that, is something that's pretty terrifying. And also, constant fraud attempts by people. Seeing our emails spoofed all the time, with emails going out that we've changed our wiring instructions. Every day I get an email from someone, send me your updated wiring instructions. I said, we haven't updated our wiring instructions in years. So if you got an email from me that said that, look at it again, because it's fictitious. They spoofed my email with an L in insured instead of a capital I. It looks exactly the same, but it's not. So that, that's something else that's really terrifying. one thing, I did a closing this week, and at the end, one of the brokers emailed me and said, thank you, you always do such a great job and you make it look so easy. And so preparing for this today, I was thinking, I do make my job look easy. Jeff makes his job look easy. That's what makes us good at our jobs, but our jobs are not easy. So please keep in mind that all of this behind the scenes stuff takes time and effort and a lot of employees to make it happen.
I got an email telling me that my aircraft closing, and I didn't even remember buying one. It was quite scary. We've got a couple of questions which are similar ones from Mohammed at Aero Law in Fort Lauderdale, and Shelley at First Republic's asked a similar one. So is John. What methods of KYC and Know Your Customer is everyone using? I think everyone can improve KYC methods. Are OFAC searches really enough?
OFAC searches are definitely not enough. And, we employ several different, I don't even know what programs we use. I know LexisNexis, WorldCheck, Google. I mean, a lot of times, we have people that we end up turning down deals and they're like, well, why? I'm like, Google your customer. Just Google his name and see what you turn up, And so we use a multitude of tools to make sure, and we hope we don't have anybody slipping through, Yeah.
Right, kind of same deal. I think we all, I don't think we have an industry, I don't think that us or Insured or AIC or all of the title companies, there's not we don't use all the same database. I think we all have our specific measures that work for our company. But no, OFAC searches aren't enough. Google searches give you a lot of really good kind of basis to start. When you get money in and you don't really know, where it's come from, a simple Google search will kind of lead you to kind of start that process. And so for us, we don't require our customers to do like a KYC checklist or anything, but we do that behind the scenes more. And so we kind of do it on our end. And if something's not checking out, we ask questions from there. But there's not an industry standard, but I think everybody has something that works, for each company.
And one thing else I'd like to say is you cannot rely, like the brokers cannot rely on the fact that we're doing KYC. We can't rely on, our good customer, David Hernandez, brought this deal to me. So, I'm sure he did his KYC. You cannot rely on that. You have to do your own. If they come to talk to you, they're going to want to see that you did your own KYC searches.
Jeff, are you seeing more disreputable people coming your way? Or trying to come your way?
Absolutely. I mean, I think with the uptick in activity, the private aviation boom is not just happening in the United States. It's all over the world, and everything with business aviation touches the United States at some point. And so for us as escrow companies, we see all that. And, I think that's one positive that you hate to say positive, but I'm cautiously optimistic from, some of the Aircraft Guarantee Corporation is that it has brought to light some of the practices that are not great that are put on us as the escrow companies. And I think that will really start to work to kind of nip some of those in the buds. And I think for us, it taught us that all it takes is one bad transaction to ruin your company. And so for us, we've really taken a deep dive into all the random ones that we get and basically say, it's not worth it. We're not going to do it. I appreciate it, but you need to go find somebody else. And so, we're turning away more customers than we ever have, not because of a volume, but it's just not worth the risk. And, the domestic transactions can be easy to vet. The international ones are a little harder to vet. And so that's where the cause of concern more is on my end. But yeah, I think you see a lot of bad actors. You always have, but I think it's even more so. So yes.
We've got a question from Christopher Mace over in the UK. Are you finding that any transactions involving financiers are more difficult than before due to more bank regulatory requirements and due diligence in a pandemic world? Jeff?
I'm not seeing it. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't think that they're any harder to do. I think that they're just asking a lot more questions of us about what are our policies and procedures. And so it's pretty, I don't know that, I'm not seeing banks have more things that they're requiring or we got to start doing this or that. I think more than anything, the banks are coming to us and kind of saying, what are your policies? What are your procedures? What's your insurance look like? And so from a transaction to closing, it's still pretty the same. I don't think that there's anything that's really changed on that, but just more clarifying what we're doing on our end to make them feel comfortable moving forward.
I agree with what Jeff said. And the banks may be requiring more from their customer, but that's just not anything we would know. That'd be a question from one of the bankers.
Okay, I've got a question from Mike Francis. Joan, you can go first. Are the federal authorities or regulators offering any assistance with the fraud issues you're seeing? Do they seem to be paying attention to this?
They do pay attention to it. And, we turn a lot of stuff over to the FBI and they pay attention to us, so we're happy for that. And then, our IT guy contacts somebody to get these fraudulent websites and fraudulent emails shut down. And they pretty much, for the most part, work with them and are cooperative. So.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think they are helpful. I think that it's prudent that anytime anybody in this industry sees kind of attempted fraud, you do report it to authorities. Because we had a round a few years ago when this hit our industry, and you started to see FBI agents and every now and then would speak at some of our trade shows, and they kind of claimed that these fraud guys will go from industry to industry until they realize that your industry has figured it out. So the more that we can report to them, the more that they're going to take a watchful eye. And so I think it is important. We've seen some stuff. I've reported it to, the FBI. I actually have a meeting coming up with a special agent to kind of go over some of the stuff that we've been seeing, because it's borderline impressive, some of the stuff that they can do. And the more that we can notify FBI, Homeland Security, and all those entities, it's just going to be better for us.
I think the problem is online fraud is one of those industries that works really well from home. They're not at a disadvantage.
That's right.
And so,
I get a comment that the yacht industry is seeing the same thing, so that's interesting, and not surprising.
So we've got a question from John. Can we drive the industry to a standard KYC format and process, especially a timeline to complete?
I don't see that there's going to be a standard in the industry about, I guess he's asking like specific forms or whatever. I think each company has to make their own decision how they're going to deal with it for their company. But I know we have a KYC form we send out and ask for buyer, seller, anyone remitting or receiving funds to complete for us. And, I'd like to say also, people get upset with us when we've asked and they're repeat customers or whatever, but there were some people involved in the aircraft guarantee indictment that their status changed pretty quickly. And so, I saw in the last town hall meeting, someone suggested, well, if we update once a year, is that enough? I don't think it is.
Okay. Question from Tara Adkins, Jeff. Does IATS and Aerospace Reports have written KYC policies and procedures that can be shared with external parties?
On us, yeah. We have a PDF that details our policy, so we're happy to provide that if ever asked.
Okay.
We have the same.
really nice question from Janine Inarelli. Would you guys consider offering a KYC search as a service to the brokerage trade? Alternatively, is there a recommendation for a service that offers a basket of searches that the trade can make use of prior to even entering into a brokerage agreement?
Absolutely not, because as I said earlier, you cannot rely on our searches. I mean, that's
I agree.
I don't.
Yeah, I think it goes a little bit back to the question of, can there be kind of standard across the board? I think that would be ideal. I think it does make these transactions hard for everybody that we all have our own due diligence piece. So if there is, I would love if we as an industry push towards something like that. I don't know how easy that would be to achieve, but I think it would be a good goal to be better with each other, sharing information. But I don't think that would ever prevent, your individual entity from having to do their own checks. So I don't think Janine should come to Joan or I and we say, hey, it looks good on our end, you're good. I think Janine and whoever needs to do theirs, we do ours, and just probably be a little bit better about sharing information at times.
Okay. Question from Oscar. Have you ever turned down transactions at the 11th hour due to bad KYC checks, Joan?
Absolutely.
And
because
at 12th hour?
We don't get our KYC until the 11th hour. And, it's really unfortunate when we have to do it, but we have to do it.
Jeff?
It goes into the previous discussion. If you don't wait until the 11th hour to get us the information, that situation is averted, but if a transaction on our end is canceled at the 11th hour, it's not on us, it's because you waited. As a general rule, if you'll cooperate with us early on, we can let you know very early that it's not going to slide and you have the opportunity to go find someone else to do it. But if you wait till the 11th hour, or you wait to fund the transaction 6 hours before the aircraft's being located and the money comes from somewhere else, then absolutely, we will. So, and that's kind of like Joan said, people get upset at us about that as if it's somehow our problem. It's not,
We've got a question from Tara Adkins. What changes are escrow agents making to their processes and or systems to prevent a successful fraud attempt?
Well, we've had our email and everything locked down very securely for a long time. I don't know that we're making any specific changes because I feel like we've got all of our security in place. And procedure-wise on our transactions, of course, we verbally verify all wire transfer instructions. Again, unbelievably, but that makes some people mad that we're taking up their time to verbally verify their wire transfer instructions. We're doing it for you. So please don't be upset with us, And, we watch the incoming emails real carefully, try to notice if the email address is odd, but like I said, I've seen spoofs of my email that look totally legit, except when they put in an extra R in aircraft or something like that. But when they just change the I to an L, a capital I to an L in the word insured, which is in my email address, you can't detect it. So, but we tried to watch very carefully, of course, the wording. Some of these guys from Nigeria or wherever they're from still have odd language, and it makes it easy to detect that there's something weird going on. But, we recently got a message from IATA that some fraud was perpetrated on somebody in the industry, and it sounded pretty... It went a long ways. I mean, it sounded like they even verbally verified, talked with the people and did pretty much everything they could do to try to detect it was fraud. And we've even seen that here where someone was following an email trail. They knew the plane was up in the air and the people would not be available to talk to, and called one of our agents to confirm things. And fortunately, she knew his voice and she knew this was not his voice. And that was the only way we were able to detect that was fraud. So I don't know what happened in the recent thing that IATA reported, but probably something like that. So you could do everything you can do and still get taken.
It is terrifying.
Yes.
How sophisticated these things can be. Jeff, you were nodding on.
Yeah, in light of everything, it definitely makes you examine your policies and procedures. I think all of us having a good relationship with our IT company and, keeping up with current trends are important. We hear, there's multi-factor and all this stuff you can do. What's scary is there's going to be a time when these, they may figure out how to do that. To Joan's kind of point about, I ran KYC on person. She was a female. She provided me a copy of the passport. I had talked to her on the phone before, and when it came time to verbally confirm the wire instructions, the person that called was a male, acting as if it was. And had I not had a conversation, had I not been prudent with my KYC, and this is where you kind of get into the hardship of some of the international transactions, I wouldn't have known that. He read the wire details exactly how they were, but it's sophisticated. They figured out already that the industry requires verbal, and so it definitely makes you look into every policy and procedure that you currently have, and what do I need to tweak, what can I do better.
Kerry Dowling is saying it's a good reason to have a team lead for each side, so only one person can issue instructions. Do you agree with that?
It sounds like a great idea. I don't know that that's always going to, not every transaction has a lawyer or someone that will take a lead for them. I wish they did, but they don't. So,
Yeah, it's hard when you're working with, the principal on something, and you ask him for his wire instructions, and then he says, well, you need to contact my CFO.
Right. I'll bring in.
The CFO is the one that wants to do that, or my accountant will provide that, or my assistant will provide that. And so in theory, great idea. It's harder to put into practice.
Agreed.
Okay, changing slightly, because your job's not all about dealing with fraud and bad actors. Richard Pearson is asking, is the FAA gradually catching up on its backlog of documents? Or is it falling further behind every day?
I haven't seen it really slipping any further behind, but they're a full 9 weeks behind. And FAA counsel's office is so far behind. They told us in December, 10 days before you even can call us and ask about the status of an opinion. And we waited 11 days within the last few weeks, and they told us, well, now we're more like 25 to 30 days behind. So, it's really unfortunate. The budget for the FAA counsel's office is awful, and they're working on a shoestring. They've been assigned to many, many tasks other than just issuing opinions about trust agreements and LLCs, registration issues. I know they've been inundated with work too, the aircraft guarantee stuff. I believe they're being involved in each transaction to make, get their final approval also with the Department of Justice. David Hernandez could probably maybe talk more about that, and Jack Gilchrist, but once again, it's just piling on work to them, and they don't have the resources. So unfortunately, no.
Jeff, you disagree?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's one thing to consider, with fly wires and imports and exports and stuff like that. I used to tell people, if you close early, if you close in the morning, you need a fly wire there's a good chance you'll have it by the afternoon, or you'll have that confirmation. It's not. We've seen sometimes that it takes a day or two to get flyers. It's just so hit or miss. and there already were pretty hit or miss on a lot of things, and it's even more. And so, I mean, yeah, I don't see them. It's hard for me to imagine them ever getting back to the 4 to 6 weeks that we saw for a long time, but it's slow.
The examiners are all still working remotely. And I feel like they really don't have much, we haven't been notified at all that they're planning to come back to work anytime soon. I think they're kind of banking on the CARES initiative that's going to start up in October, maybe solving some of their problems, but I don't really see that as being much of a resolution at this time because it's already April, that's October. We haven't had any meetings with them, which we've been told there'll be meetings with the community to find out, get suggestions from us, and that hasn't happened. So I feel like when they do roll that out, it's going to be very minimal, and it's going to take several years to get it up and running, which eventually will, I think, make it more efficient, but it's definitely not. I don't see it happening anytime soon.
Mohammed saying he actually filed a claim of a lien on an aircraft, sued for foreclosure, parties settled, filed a release of a lien, all before the FAA even recorded the claim of the lien that was 5 weeks before. Which is pretty worrying because that means that's probably going to get one filed on it soon. Final question from Chris Mace. This is your chance to attack whoever you feel like in the industry. As escrow agents, you play a crucial part in a chain of people to make a successful transaction. In your view, who is the weakest link in the chain of a deal and how can it be approved? Who are you going for? Brokers, financiers, lawyers?
That's a loaded question.
I mean, I don't feel like anybody is the weakest link in a transaction. They're all essential. I mean, you have to have the brokers. As a matter of fact, I hate it when I'm doing a deal and there aren't brokers, because the brokers are the ones that keep it moving along and keep going down their checklist and what do we need to do and things like that. When we just have a buyer and seller going direct, that's when it's a nightmare, because they don't want to deal with any of the paperwork. They just want to sell their airplane and they want to buy an airplane, and that's it. So I hate it when there's not brokers. Finance people don't bother me either. I mean, they've got their checklist and they keep things moving along too. I hear from them all the time. Hey, have you heard any more? Is it, when are we closing? They try to stay on top of it. So I don't really, I guess buyers and sellers are the weakest links.
That exact question is why I've always pressed people at stuff like this. You need to have escrow agents speaking more on the topics that we deal with at trade shows, because I think people think that they understand how we do our jobs and what we need, but I'm not sure that people fully 100% understand. And so, I mean, I think I'm putting a little bit, I'm not trying to say that it's on us, but I think if we as escrow agents have the opportunities to do more things like this and kind of get out the things that you can be doing. I remember a couple years ago, it may have been a corporate jet investor in Miami when Stuart Lapioker did a session on 10 ways to make your legal bill as high as possible. And it was in jest, but there's almost a part of me that wants to do a 10 ways to make your escrow transaction delay. And, there's things that if we have the opportunity to the mass explain what are those type of things, and people will learn and pay attention and take that to heart, I think a lot of these little things can be rectified and we can have smoother closings.
We can do 10 ways to delay your deal in Miami next year. This year in November. Quick question from Tara Adkins. I know I said that's the last one. She's saying, what about the time it's taking to get filing times at the FAA window? Do you see that improving anytime soon? Do you think the filing bin will ever go away? And will we get back to real-time filing times? Jen?
I don't think it'll go away. I think they're very happy with the way it's working. The FAA is. I don't think they have any intention, like I said, of coming back to work, anytime soon. And so, that's a problem. unfortunately, and I was recently learned about this, but the FAA's council did issue an opinion last year when COVID first kind of took place that placing your documents in the filing bin has the same effect as the mailbox rule. And you're therefore authorized to operate on the copy of the registration application at that point. I don't think that's been tested in a court of law for insurance purposes or anything like that. So I'm sure there are still concerns, but it is what it is. And because it is what it is, I don't recommend starting closings after 2 o'clock anymore if you want to get a same day filing time, 2 o'clock Central Time.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think that the escrow companies and law firms in the PD room, we've done our last hand it through the window and get a stamp. I don't know that we'll ever see that again. And it's so hit or miss. Sometimes we'll do an e-filing, or sometimes we'll drop it in the bin, and 15 minutes later we'll have the filing time. Sometimes we don't get it for 2 days, and you find out, well, somehow that never got in the system. Sometimes it's a couple hours. It's just hit or miss. And there's no real, I can't consciously tell somebody, hey, we should have this by X time. It's just, who knows, and I think that they're still adapting, and maybe they'll be able to figure it out as this progresses. But no, there's no real set. It's just one-offs.
It is. It's about the time you think you have it figured out, it changes. And I don't think it will improve because I don't think they see it as a problem.
Quick question from Frank Janik. What is the reason for the new longer FAA approval time to approve trusts? They're now saying 3+ weeks.
Their workload, like I said, Frank, I don't know if you heard me say earlier, but their budget has been cut. They are very shorthanded. Their workload has increased exponentially, and they are doing all they can do. And they're also working remotely. So, they're doing the best they can do, but they're overloaded.
I'm pretty sure they used to have 4 attorneys, and now I think they only have 2 that are doing them. So less staffing, increased volume means a recipe for disaster.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think with the fact we had so many questions shows we should do this more often. In fact, it was Jeff's idea. So thanks so much to Joan Roberts from Insured Aircraft Title Service and to Jeff Snowden from Aerospace Reports. We really appreciate this. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Welcome. Thanks.
We're now going to try and watch a brief advertisement from Jetcraft. If you haven't seen the Jetcraft report, I recommend it very highly. And now we're going to switch. A few weeks ago, we were delighted to have David Hernandez from Feder Price and Jack Gilchrist from Gilchrist Aviation, and we've got them back. Although David seems to be having a minor earthquake in the background.
There we go. I'm all set.
Jack, how are you?
I'm well, thank you very much.
Great to see you. David, you're doing well?
Doing well, thanks.
So that was a very informative session, looking at deal dynamics. Jack, what would you like to add?
Good. Yeah, no, it was a good session, and I think it's sometimes it feels like a bit of sort of circular discussion about everybody's kind of pointing the finger right at what the delays are and that sort of thing. I think there certainly we do very much the same work as the title companies do as far as closings and filings and escrows and that sort of thing. And what both Joan and Jeff discussed are common problems. I have, some thoughts about the processes and procedures, but I think overall the challenges to the industry very much, and I think they made that clear. The industry is at a point we're sort of reaching breakneck speed to some extent in many aspects, and but that's exciting. It's a good problem to have. Let's do it.
Right.
David, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I think what people should really stress or understand is that escrow agents serve a very valuable purpose. And, Joan and Jeff, they do, they perform a role that is a huge check and balance on the process. They're basically the final step, whether it's the money transfers or the document reviews. And if you look at it from a more of a strategic perspective, and I know the focus is on Wright Brothers and aircraft guarantee and all this issue, but query whether or not that would have happened if Wright Brothers and aircraft guarantee weren't performing the same roles, right? And so you had a trust company also filing their documents, so there was no second independent party looking at the documents, right? And so I've been working with Joan and Jeff for years, and the things that they just highlight with just very subtle, what about this? What about that? It's a tickler to me to say, look, you guys are great. Let's do it. Whether it's IR filings or signatures or, let's look at the LLC statement. All of those things are important. And if you miss doing those things, Joan and Jeff have been great over the years to catch. So that's the thing I would stress is that, look, rely on your escrow agents, but they cannot be the independent auditor for KYC and other things that are required and that you should do independently.
Well, let me jump in there, David. You make a great point, and I mentioned this recently in a conference call, but there was a very significant problem. And not to prejudge anything, but in the aircraft guarantee Wright Brothers relationship, anybody in that equation, the fact that a trust company uses a very closely held, very related title company to close transactions, there's no room in there to do what we've been discussing, KYC or background check or Google or whatever the case is, because there's no check and balance in that process. And that's not the sole issue there at all, but certainly a red flag, a problem that everybody should focus on, I think, in that regard. I think that's an important one.
Right.
So we had you on a few weeks ago talking about the issues with the investigation into Wright Brothers and aircraft title. David, what's happened since then?
Well, everything, unfortunately, that I said in the prior call is happening. The investigation's widening, subpoenas are flowing, all the deals are being gummed up. The government is learning how vast of an issue this is, and it's quite shocking to realize how little the government understands about the transaction process. But frankly, it's also alarming how little the industry understands about the export process and customs regulations. Both groups, if you will, the government and the industry, are looking at each other going, what's your problem here? Why couldn't you figure this out? It's fairly simple. But in terms of what has happened, as the government learns more, they're understanding the scope of the problem, and the government will, I predict, significantly slow down trust applications and process. And if a few people in the government had their way, they would completely eliminate non-citizen trust. That's just a fact. They don't like them, they don't understand them, and they see no benefit. obviously there's enormous benefit for using non-citizen trust, but I can't help that it doesn't take a month to look at a document and figure out it's okay. And so there are some, storm clouds on the horizon, and it's going to impact the industry, I suspect, in the next few weeks. Now, there's guidance that may be coming out shortly, which is great, but in the short term, there's going to be a lot more pain than good news.
Jack, are you as pessimistic?
I try not to be. I'm probably. Let me tell you a couple of areas where I'm not pessimistic. First of all, I know that there is a tremendous valuable use of non-citizen trusts, as does David knows that as well. David and I are both involved in a trade organization now that would encompass not only general aviation, but also commercial aviation. Okay, so if you look simply at the fact and the value of non-citizen trusts or the trust ownership in aircraft registration, trust agreements have been they're extremely valuable in that process, and there are many very large what we would all consider to be U.S. based companies that utilize the trusts and non-citizen trusts for registration of aircraft, and for a very valid and functional reason. And so the industry behind the non-citizen trusts is very strong. So you do have that factor. So and David would not disagree with me on that point. It's they're very useful. They're extremely useful. The second thing is that while I also agree with David's position in connection with many federal agencies, let's say, distrust of non-citizen trusts, it will require, in my view, Congress to be involved in the process of changing the fact that you can register an aircraft under a non-citizen trust, because of the fact that it would require regulatory change at a minimum in connection with dissolving the use of non-citizen trust. They're set out in federal aviation regulations very clearly, the process for registering an aircraft. It's all very legitimate, and again, I know David would agree with that it's a legally and legitimate process. There have been a few folks that have misused it. It's actually a very small, I think fairly small minority of users of non-citizen trusts that have kind of given it that bad name. But now David's view in the short term, there is a lot of scrutiny, and as we're seeing right now in aircraft guarantee, the federal agencies involved are a virtual quagmire. I have to keep a list of the acronyms used for these different agencies on my desk as a cue, because I'm not used to speaking in code that way. But there are so many agencies involved, interested in this process, that many that I've never come into contact with, but for David and folks like him in Washington, D.C. that do this export work. But they are very invested in the process here. That's the challenge.
And let me stress, I don't want to be entirely pessimistic. I think there are regulations or guidance that's going to come out shortly. The problem is different parts of the government don't agree with each other. And I'll explain that. The Census Bureau folks that are basically, they just want to collect the data. They just want to report the exports and see how the U.S. economy is doing. Said, hey, no problem. Just give us the information. If it's late, that's okay. Just give it to us. By contrast, the way the government's set up, Census Bureau delegates their enforcement to the Commerce Department, or BIS, the police, if you will. And so you've got the regulator saying, no worry, just give us information. We just want it for statistical purposes. But then you have the police on the other side saying, wait a minute, why aren't you enforcing all of this? That's our job. That's job security for us. And that's the difference. But I think ultimately it's the regulator, it's their regulations, and they're the ones that are going to interpret them. So I hopefully they'll win out, and we'll have some blanket amnesty coming. I shouldn't say amnesty, a forgiveness period or something to allow the industry to get back to normal, because deals aren't happening. People are doing a lot of crazy things right now because they're desperate. And when people are desperate, they do desperate things. And unfortunately, some of those desperate things are illegal.
Let me add to that too, David's emphasis there, to not let people get too disheartened that it's just the federal government acting in this realm. There is industry involved, and a significant number of folks that know these issues from every side, I would suggest, and that industry group, coalition, let's call it, is approaching these folks to say, first of all, we are very interested in complying with federal law in every aspect, export, et cetera. We want to help clarify the issues. We want to help clarify a path forward, and we want to have a discussion in that regard. And I think that's very, very valuable. NBAA and some others are very involved in the process, and a lot of the members of these organizations, of course, have a great deal of interest in curing those problems. So there is effort in that regard, and I think at the end of the day, hopefully the various federal agencies that are involved will realize that the best thing here is discussion and clarification. And then if the process needs smoothing or simplifying, hopefully they'll be open to that. I think they would be. I mean, I like to think that they're not interested in setting a speed trap, so to speak, along the way. Maybe they are. Some are, I'm sure, but hopefully the majority of them are not.
All right.
Okay. David, there's a lawyer you're very familiar with, Eddie Gross, Federal Price. He's been pointing out that soon the Corporate Transparency Act will be enacted into law, requiring people to submit to FinCEN information about beneficial owners, the people who control or own reporting companies.
Right.
And Shelley and Jim are both saying, can you give us more on this and what finances will have to do to comply with the FinCEN rules?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of publications that are coming out now, but I think Eddie and I've talked about, I've watched various publications or webinars and other things. I mean, the act is real. It's a sleeper act, if you will, that people just don't realize. But I think this industry of all industries, particularly if you do cross-border transactions, see a lot of shell corporations, whether it's BVI, Bermuda, pick anywhere in the world, you're going to see a ton of shell corporations. So what this Corporate Transparency Act does is that if you have any business in the United States, in large part, any state, typically what I typically see is I have non-U.S. citizens say I've opened up a Delaware LLC and I have a bunch of cascading entities behind that. Those cascading, all of that stuff's going to have to be in large part. There's caveats, obviously. All of that's going to have to be transparent. So, tracking down the high net worth individual wherever he or she may be in the world is going to be almost required in most cases. And so, the ability to hide who is the ultimate owner at the very top of the chain, whether they're based in Russia or South America somewhere, it's going to be almost required point. And I think once people realize the ramifications of this, that'll actually help transparency and Barry, what's going to happen in the industry? Some people are going to say, to heck with it. I don't want to be involved in any type of U.S. regulation, and they'll move their aircraft out of the U.S. They'll take it off the NREG. They'll put it in an offshore place. They won't even deal with the laws. And that's what people typically do. If they want to remain anonymous, completely anonymous, don't do business in the United States under those circumstances. It's a big change. More to follow.
Jack, any comments?
Not necessarily, other than to say that I do think I agree that seems to be the way the atmosphere is leaning very heavily towards transparency at every level. And of course, I see it most dramatically in dealing every day with the FAA here in Oklahoma City. But I do think it will add, to say it will add a layer of complication to transactions. Every type of transaction is probably an understatement, and certainly that will be the case with aircraft transactions. It will add some complexity to what we do every day already. Yeah, but insofar as it scares off mal players, that's all good. I'm good with that. But certainly, look, bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake is not valuable at any level either. So I think we have to be cautious of that. Hopefully, the industry will push back against that. Just that concept.
So there's still a lot of uncertainty following the aircraft guarantee and Wright brothers investigation. When will it be over, David?
So, fortunately, with respect to the Wright brothers, I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. So the assistant U.S. attorney is handling it, is indicating that they are on the verge, if they haven't already, of starting sending out funds that have been trapped. It's the agency, and I'll tell you the name of the agency that's sending it out. It's the U.S. Customs and Border Protection National Finance Center Forfeiture Funds Team. So that's the agency that's sending the money out. got the thing right there. So the money's going to start happening. With respect to aircraft gear, so a couple weeks, let's say a couple weeks, hopefully. With respect to the aircraft guarantee, I think the aircraft guarantee, the government's starting to get their hands around it. It's been nearly 2 months now since they really start focused on it. I think the primary BIS agent, Paul Mack, is to say he's overwhelmed is a massive understatement. He's trying to move a mountain with a shovel. It's never going to happen anytime soon. But I think what's going to happen is Jack mentioned, there are people in the agency that don't necessarily agree with the slow pace. I think that's happening, and other people are stepping in. So I think you're going to get guidance to give them direction. I know that the guidance that's coming out of Washington is slightly different than what we're seeing in the field. Some would say, let's just give them a pass and get over this and start doing it forward, start doing it correctly going forward. I think, anybody that has in terms of timing, anybody that has a deal that wants to close in the next couple weeks, maybe we should rethink that. If you haven't already started the process, if you haven't already started the process, good luck with that. It's not going to close for months, I bet. But if you already started the process, you're probably pretty close. So it depends on where you're at, how proactive you are, how engaged you are with the government. But aircraft guarantee is going to be a long time to resolve that stuff. And we don't know what's happening behind the scenes, because there's a lot more stuff happening behind the scenes that is not public right now.
Mm-hmm.
Jack, your view?
Yeah, I think that would be consistent with my view and my experience. One of the things that we've tried to do here at our firm is work through the process in a way that if I were in the position of these federal agencies, BIS and so on, these folks, is what information do I want in connection with the current situation for ownership of the aircraft involved? Secondly, what is the intent of the aircraft owner, the beneficial owner with the aircraft at this point? And kind of a preliminary question is, as David's mentioned, is have they complied with export requirements in the U.S.? So we've tried to put together the information that we've been dealing with clients in a way that it is organized, and that they do have from the outset what they want. So we've been we see a path. We've not reached the end of it yet, is probably the way I would describe it. And as far as timing is, just like any good lawyer, I wouldn't set a timeline, but I would say things are moving, and they realize that the longer I think the federal government realizes that the longer that it sits, the problems don't go away or get easier. They need to be processing those things. And there are many folks in this, as we've said before, many folks, the majority of folks are very, very much innocent bystanders. They've been caught up in the net, so to speak. And so we need to get those folks out of the net and moving on. So that's, as far as aviation speed is concerned, it's something this industry is not accustomed to, but you have to start the process, and that's, as David said, get moving forward is the best approach.
Brilliant. Thanks so much to Jack Gilchrist of Gilchrist Aviation, David Hernandez of Vedder Price. Earlier we had Joan Roberts from IATS and Jeff Snowden from Aerospace Reports. Thanks so much to all our fantastic speakers and for joining us, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you. And just to remind everyone, we're always available. If you missed the town hall, it's always available via your favourite podcast. And also thank you to Jetcraft for advertising in this issue. Thank you and stay safe.
Introducing Jetcraft's 5-year pre-owned business aviation market forecast. What is the outlook for business aviation post-COVID-19? Jetcraft's latest annual forecast delivers a precise, comparative, and quantified look at the pre-owned market. Find out more about how business aviation will recover and return to strength post-COVID-19, and key factors that will influence the pre-owned market during the forecast period. Download the market forecast today to take advantage of Jetcraft's global expertise and industry-leading insights.